Welcome to Instructional System Design, an Overview, Part 1, featuring Addie. Models, like stories, help us make sense of the world around us. Whether based on sheer intuition or hard research, a model offers its users a path to understanding a problem that might otherwise be incomprehensible. An instructional design model illuminates a learning challenge, allows us to visualize the form of a problem, break it down to manageable components. The value of any given model depends on context. Is the plot of the story, which is the model, the right fit for the given situation? The Addie instructional design model is a generic, adaptable process traditionally used by instructional designers, those who inform them, and those who develop and implement training. The Addie model is at the very core of instructional design and is the basis of instructional design. Each step depends on the success of the previous step, but all steps are iterative and may be rerun as necessary. There are various adaptations of the Addie model, but it generally consists of 5 cyclical phases: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. These processes represent a dynamic, flexible guideline for building effective training, including performance support tools and training environments. While the principles of instructional design have been around since at least the 1950s, Addie first appeared in 1975. It was created by the Center for Educational Technology at Florida State University for the U.S. Army. Weapon systems and support technology were becoming more and more sophisticated, and soldiers were slow to learn the ropes. The Army needed instructional systems development, and Addie was developed at first to meet that need. Flexible enough to be used with both individualized and traditional instruction based on behavioral and performance objectives, not simply knowledge retention. In the 1980s, Addie adopted to a wide variety of areas. Anything that needed to be learned could be filtered through an Addie process. Only the Addie acronym wasn't introduced until the 1990s. The 2000s through today have seen Addie integrated with other models, leveraging the Addie's strengths and filling in gaps which Addie alone simply doesn't address. The greatest flexibility, choosing the right model for the right challenge, has become standard procedure. And when it comes to learning design, Addie is usually at the heart of the optimal model. Here's a bit more detail showing each component of Addie. We begin with analysis. It's data collection, compilation, establishing the target population, and describing and tasking each component of the instruction. Phase 2 is the design phase, based solidly on the analysis conducted during Phase 1. The earlier the phase, the more important it is to be as thorough as possible, the same way the most critical part of a building is its foundation. During the design phase, each task is analyzed, training sites are selected, clear objectives are determined, and criterion-referenced assessments are constructed. Nothing wrong with the word test, except for all the painful elementary school karma it invokes. Designers prefer the term assessment, because that's what's done. A criterion-referenced assessment is a test, or any other type of assessment designed to provide a measure of how well learners are learning, based on their performance, completing clearly defined learning tasks. What remains, then, in design phase, is to logically sequence the instruction to be given to facilitate the learning process. The next phase is development. Here we review any existing materials we have at our disposal, choose methods, software tools certainly, media, and we develop our new course materials. These may be a mix of the old and new. In a perfect world, all relevant learning materials are at least reworked for this new instructional initiative. Someone, of course, has to review these new materials, and a plan must be in place for the management of the instructional components. First and foremost, this is where we plan the implementation of our work so far. In many circumstances, materials are revised once implemented, part of the iterative quality of design. Even if you get it right the first time, what's right today may be antiquated, well, soon. Having a plan to manage changes is critical to the success of the learning experience. Phase 4 is implementation. Here we go. Fairly straightforward, but don't tell the technical infrastructure team I said so. The final phase is evaluation and control, where we evaluate our learning system from the outside, gather and assess data, and revise the system as necessary. The Venn diagram shown here covers the same ideas, but it's easier on the eyes and gets to the heart of instructional design. A Venn diagram is very Zen, gives you a feeling, an impression of how instructional models are conceived, and how once this wheel starts turning, it may never stop. Analysis is a gathering of information with an open mind before any judgments are made. Listen for plain speaking. Encourage your informants to describe business needs in terms of the results desired compared to where they are now. This is the performance gap, and it's what the analysis is intended to fill, no more and no less. Discovering and understanding the performance gap is the key to communicating to informants and learners alike. What's at stake? What's new? What's ahead? Because when everyone relates to what's new naturally, connecting it to familiar past experiences, understanding, learning is quicker and more complete. This is a key reason we need to understand the current tasks, so we can effectively communicate the changes being designed, developed, and implemented. Design should be simplicity itself, describing fundamentals, necessary components as concisely as possible. This invites learner participation at a fundamental conceptual level. Be inclusive. Establish a direction, a path. Trim the input you receive down to essentials. Include in your design the tools and support aids that will be made available to learners. Development should allow room for your learners' imaginations. Don't bore or patronize your audience with too many answers. Learning is a process. Strike a balance, very Zen. Intentionally allow enough ambiguity to provoke interesting questions, a good thing. Development should invite adaptation and adoption, allowing learners to leverage what they know and learn by trial and error. Have a planned test regimen. Certainly you, the developer, will have many, if not most, of the answers, but you are encouraged to allow air for learners to fill in some blanks. When it's time for implementation, eliminate clutter. Provide a straightforward user interface with clear options. Make sure that everyone gets plenty of opportunities for practice, that there are reasonable safeguards in place not only for security but to allow users to avoid embarrassing and potentially damaging errors. Instill confidence in the system implementation. Evaluation is not simply a step in the process. It is the background activity throughout all steps in instructional design and training. Rather than an opportunity for nail-biting and fault-finding, think of evaluation as a tranquil place, a time of reflection, an energized calm. The goal is not disruption. Of course, the goal is success, a renewal, peace, and stability for your organization. A problem, likely a host of problems, has been addressed with thoughtful deliberation and action, and the hurtful performance gap, like a wound, has been healed. But Addie strives to identify performance on the job, so learners may learn new tasks. It was never intended to tell if training is the right approach to take when addressing a problem. So before you design training, you should first perform a performance analysis. A simple XY axis graph can help you figure out if training is actually what's needed. If an employee has sufficient job knowledge but an improper attitude, this may be classed as a motivational problem. The consequences, rewards of the person's behavior will have to be adjusted. This is not always bad, as the employee just might not realize the consequences of what they're doing. If the employee has both job knowledge and a favorable attitude, but the performance is unsatisfactory, then the problem may be outside the control of the employee. He may lack resources or time. Task needs process improvement, or the work situation is not well designed, etc. If the employee lacks both job knowledge and a favorable attitude, that person may be improperly placed in the position. This may imply a problem with employee selection or a promotion, and suggest that a transfer or even a discharge may be considered. If the employee desires to perform but lacks the requisite job knowledges or skills, then some type of learning solution is required, such as training or coaching, and that's where instructional design comes in. You can see Addie alone doesn't address all matters related to learning. Besides deciding whether or not instruction needs to be designed and delivered at all, when a design for learning is indicated, the Addie model invites links to other instructional models at various points in the process. Here's a high-flying overview of some of the popular ones, all approaches helping to ensure an optimal learning experience. Instruction that overwhelms learners with too much information doesn't work, even with the occasional quiz. Cognitive overload leads to boredom. Action mapping focuses on performance, not information, what learners need to do, not what they need to know. Action mapping creates activities, which mimic what learners need to do. Activities put the learner in the work situation, have them make decisions like ones they'd make on the job. Learners are allowed to fail in a safe environment and learn from their mistakes. Using action mapping, designers can create interesting interactive courses that are scenario-rich and mirror real-life activities. Sound familiar? The Addie model values these principles. Action mapping simply focuses on creating activities using its own effective methodologies and plugs easily right into the Addie model. 4C means 4 components, and ID stands for instructional design. In this model, during the design phase, tasks to be learned are ordered sequentially according to increasing difficulty. Tasks are then practiced and performed repeatedly, increasing in complexity. The level of support provided the learner diminishes as the learner gains competency. The 4 components which allow this model to work are concrete and complete tasks, plenty of supportive information available, though less and less actual support help, a just-in-time delivery of what the learner needs to know so that the learner isn't distracted or overwhelmed by irrelevant information, and what's referred to as a part-task practice, which is learning and mastering one step at a time along the way to full mastery. The 4C ID model is a particular approach to design and may be fitted easily into the Addie model during the design phase. Once you have your learning outlined, you should see if someone can actually follow the steps you've created and succeed. If they can't, you go back to the drawing board. Making adjustments to your instruction based on successive small-scale tests of this sort is called prototyping. Prototyping may be considered a design approach, but it actually fits in the Addie model more easily as part of development, because it's typically developers who are creating prototypes based on real-world applications just in time before final decisions are made prior to implementation. Before we end this segment, I want to speak a little bit about Agile. Software design methodology over the last 10 years has been heavily influenced by Agile design. Agile design takes the focus of method and places it on individuals and their interactions. Less documentation and more interactive help, more collaboration with users, and a view more open to change over sticking to a plan. Think of Agile as a philosophy rather than a business process. It's a way of looking at all of the steps in instructional design from a very human standpoint. You think of collaboration. You think of the stories that the user has and the whole team planning together, and it's people-centric. You think of the learners as your customers, and you want to provide them tools they need so that they're satisfied. So you adapt to what they want. And all of these steps that we've gone over in these other models are integrated. They flow into each other. So the solution is a mix of formal and informal learning, anything that works. What works is good. Design is always looking to the future. It's alive. There's lots of testing goes on. And there's lots of where this project fits with all the other projects. There's frequent contact with both your customers and with your teammates. There's a lot of commitment to the success. And that commitment's talked about. Again, it's more of a way of inspiring the team to do what's necessary, and it's a little more free-form because, again, it's not a structure so much as a philosophy, a way of looking at instructional design. And it becomes something of the engine. It helps us be enthusiastic about the work we do. Agile design takes the focus off method and places it on individuals and their interactions. There's less documentation and more interactive help, more collaboration with learners, who are our customers, and a view more open to change over sticking to a plan. The Agile approach is the evaluation process at the heart of Addie. Analyze, design, develop, and implement.